Hi, I'm Dr. Mike and this is NF Geeks. Well, this video is a Thursday theme video. It's a video I make for Thursdays on the NF Geeks forum where I pick a theme and then make a video and encourage other NF Geeks members to make a response video to this one based on the same theme. And this week's theme is holism and things that are holistic. And it's this week's theme because holism, the holistic movement, for better or for worse, is very much tied into being an NF. And I think the holistic movement, holistic thought as it exists, is a very NF sort of point of view and a NF worldview. And the two go together. And I think all of the things that are great about holism and holistic thought are because of NFs. And I think all the limitations and all the misgivings that are related to holistic thought are also related to NFs and being an NF. So I want to talk about my own personal journey with it first, and that is that, because I feel close to these ideas about holistic thought. And and I am an NF, and I have one of my master's degrees is in holistic leadership, which is taking a holistic view at systems and groups and institutions and bureaucracies, as opposed to looking at it from sort of a structural functionist reductionary point of view, looking at it from a holistic point of view, a whole point of view. So I have a very extensive scholarly background in holistic studies. And things that are holistic. And I think NFs are naturally drawn to holistic thought. I was sort of naturally drawn to it. The way I got into that degree program is I was at an open house for the university where I got my graduate degrees. I was at an open house for the humanities department to get my master's in humanities and eventually PhD. And so they had this big sort of open house in the main building, which is actually this giant mansion. Beautiful mansion, and it's sort of in the open ballroom of this literally ballroom of this mansion. And so there's various groups of people meeting, so I was meeting with the people who are in humanities and people who wanted MBAs, we're applying for MBAs, we're meeting faculty of the MBAs and so on and so forth. And from way across this ballroom I saw this sort of tripod set up with a big poster of this helix symbol on it, and it was just absolutely fascinated me. And I saw it from way across the room, and I just had to go and see, what is this all about? What is this symbol? What are they talking about? I just naturally sort of gravitated toward it, and it was for the holistic counseling degree. At that point there was only a holistic counseling degree. They didn't have the holistic leadership master's degree yet. It was like 12 years ago. So I went and I listened to this whole thing, and I just naturally understood what they were getting at intellectually about holism and why you would want to take a holistic perspective and what a holistic perspective means. I just naturally, came into it. And it suits my intellectual pursuits, perfectly. I like my education and my educational background. It suits a person like me perfectly. And basically an intellectual in NF. And it's a very, all my degrees are very transdisciplinary and holistic. How a bunch of multiple fields crisscross and interact with each other. So it's very, it suits me well, I think. Now, the main thing I want to point out to start off with on this sort of conversation is that the main problem with holistic thought and holistic perspective is that holism and holistic has become a synonym for alternative. So if I say I'm into holistic perspectives, people automatically think that means, well, he must be into alternative medicine, alternative therapy, acupuncture, whatever, crystals, Reiki, pyramid hats, whatever it is, New Age stuff. It sort of automatically means that, and the holistic community and holistic culture has set itself up to be like that, and that's part of being an NF, which I hope to get to. But what I want to make clear is that that's not what holism means. That's not what being holistic means. It doesn't mean being alternative. Holistic means literally whole, like whole, not hole in the ground, but whole meaning all, wholeness. and that it means to be inclusive. So that when you're looking at someone or a group, or you're looking at something holistically, it means that you're taking into account the bigger picture always. This is why it's perfect for an ENFP to be a holistic, scholar, because the ENFPs think like this anyway naturally. So, but it literally means to take in a greater picture. It may take in a greater view. How does this one thing fit into this much larger thing? Or how can we take this one thing and incorporate it into this much larger thing? Okay, that's what it really means to be holistic. So it does mean all that alternative stuff in the sense that it's not an outright rejection of it. Okay, it's not an outright rejection of crystals, of herbs, of Reiki, of whatever. It's not an outright rejection of it. It's saying, how do we incorporate that? How can we use that? How can that come in? It just simply doesn't keep the door closed. It doesn't say no. But it doesn't mean holism. To be holistic also means to accept traditional medicine and traditional therapy and psychiatry and psychology and cancer treatments, whatever it is. It means to accept all those things too. It's not a rejection of those things. Okay, I think that the alternativeness of holism as a community that exists has to do with NF. Because as I got more into MBTI, it became apparent that holistic culture is just abundantly overflowing with NFs. Okay, mostly INFJs and INFPs, to be honest. But it's way skewed in NF, and therefore that holistic alternative view is some kind of NF consciousness thing going on. And my guess is that it's a rebellion of sorts of the way NFs are treated, about having alternate ideas or different ideas that are NF ideas, and therefore it's sort of an NF culture without knowing it's an NF culture, but an NF counterculture. Okay, meaning that it's sort of all the NFs in who are involved in holism are people who have sort of been persecuted one way or another about having these beliefs, and so it becomes sort of this rebellion against things. So I can understand that as an NF. I understand that, and I go against the grain on a whole bunch of stuff. So, I understand that position, but it's not truly being holistic. Being holistic means to accept science. It means to accept physics. It means to accept medicine. At the same time. Again, it's about being inclusive. You want to include things, okay, always to be, and that means including, finding a place for all of it. So to be holistic, if somebody's having some sort of illness or somebody's having some sort of difficulty, it finds a way. Well, how can I take counseling and therapy and crystals and put them together? Can these things have a role with each other? Can these things have their own sort of place in a greater system, in a greater orchestra of healing? Healing meaning making something whole again, because that's what holism is all about. How do I make something whole again? How do I bring things into a whole? It doesn't mean alternative necessarily. It simply doesn't necessarily shut the door on alternative. It doesn't mean you have to accept alternative all the time either. It doesn't mean you have to get, as soon as there's a problem, go get the crystals. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It just says that, somebody says, well, crystals help, and holism says, well, go get the crystals and, make it part of the bigger thing. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But there's no reason to automatically say no if we can work it into a greater whole pattern. Because you're always looking to make a greater whole, a greater connection of something. That's what it really means to be holistic. Now, I think holism has an important role to play with MBTI and personality type. From an academic point of view, I feel that holistic studies as they exist, and there are colleges that take this seriously, like the one that I went to, to get this degree, and others, where the holistic perspective is looked at from a scholarly perspective, in an attempt to incorporate it into academia. I think those types of programs might be a place where MBTI can find its niche in terms of having scholars and a scholarly background and actual research done. Maybe I'll do a video about this at some point, but I think trying to get psychology to acknowledge personality type is beating a dead horse. They obviously don't like it. They think it's crap. They think it's pseudoscience. Psychology is stuck in its own dogma, just like any other kind of system can get stuck in its own dogma. They don't want what we're selling, so we should go to other fields that would be willing to take it on. I think holistic thought, on an academic level, on a scholarly level, absolutely is good for that. Is really very good and would be a great place to have that happen. Now, more importantly, I think a holistic view is something that's good to adopt in terms of looking at type. Okay, I think one of the problems, and I've sort of alluded to this in other videos and things, is that we've become too reductionary, and in terms of the functions, and that we try to reduce everything to one function, and this one function is going to explain a bajillion processes and behaviors and all that. And I don't think that's wise, obviously. But I think more importantly is, I've beaten that horse. I've beaten that. What I think is more important is to kind of see type holistically. In other words, not so much to think about, let's say, FI, for example, but how does FI incorporate and connect to everything that's about being an ENFP? How does it fit into this much larger thing that is ENFP? And fit together. And how does ENFP impact FI, and how does FI impact ENFP, as opposed to just looking at, well, what is this little, reduce everything to this little nugget of cognitive function. I think if you look at that in a much larger sense, you get a much better sense of what does it mean to be of certain type, and then you can also see all the different ways that type can be, and all the different ways that type can interact with other things. So I think a holistic approach to type itself is just a good way to be. And it's good to be holistic in terms of typology, just in terms of thinking about ideas and theories and whatever. How can we incorporate different parts of things into one system? I'm more interested in creating a much grander system than fight about which system is the best system. I feel good and solid with MBTI. It's my bread and butter, and Keirsey. I like Keirsey, but that's sort of my core. But I like to think, how can all this brought together into one system? How can Enneagram and MBTI be one system, be brought together into one system? How can Socionics and MBTI be brought into one system, as opposed to two separate systems, two separate things? How are these actually one thing? If we're all talking about personality type in some way or another, then it seems to me in the best interests of everyone to kind of see, how can this holistically be brought together into one theory, to one sort of meta typology, if you will. And doing that doesn't mean accepting everything. Again, being holistic doesn't mean you accept everything necessarily. It means that you try to bring things in and fit it into a greater whole, and always trying to create this bigger whole about these ideas and put them together. But it doesn't mean that every idea is equally good. It means that for a whole to form, how can these things come together? How can we make it come together to form this greater, more solid whole? That is something worth striving for. But to kind of go backwards, I think that the only way that can happen is if typology re-enters academia and real actual scholars doing actual academic research are involved. And I think holistic studies and various academic holistic studies that exist, like at Naropa University, or where I went, Salve Regina University, that these schools are places where, because of holism, typology could find an intellectual home, a scholarly home, So put that out there into the universe, and maybe that'll happen. All right, so that's it. So what are your experiences with holism and being holistic, and what do you think about it? You can love it, hate it, it's okay. We're going to be holistic about holism, so let it fly if you think it's stupid. But whatever your opinions are about holism, or your personal experiences with holism, would be very interesting to hear about. So please do that. And thank you for watching. As always, follow NF Geeks on Twitter and Tumblr, and join the NF Geeks Facebook forum, where you can win a free MBTI typing in our typing lottery, or if you'd like, you can have a session with me for the cheapest price around and get your personality type done right, and cheaply. So I can't beat that. So let's see those videos about holism.